Welcome to another episode of Ignite Finance. I'm your host, Joel Bhagwandin. Today I have with me a very important and influential guest, Dr. Peter Ramsaroop, the Chief Investment Officer of the country, who is the CEO of the Guyana Office for Investment. Dr. Peter Ramsaroop holds a very important portfolio and over the last 5 years would have made remarkable achievements in terms of promoting Guyana on the international stage as the number one investment destination in the world. Before I get into my questions I would like to pose to Dr. Ramsaroop today, I just want to give a quick overview of where we came from over the last 5 years and where we are today in terms of the investment environment. Dr. Ramsaroop, in 2020, when the PPPC government assumed office following the 2020 election, the state of the economy was deteriorated, particularly the non-oil sectors. We had massive loss of jobs, and those job losses were not structural job losses per se. Those were by way of intentional policy of the former APNU AFC government, for example, where they shut down the sugar industry, they fired workers in the hinterland regions, and very draconian tax measures, very unfriendly economic policies that prohibited the expansion of private sector investment, for example, say even except in the oil and gas sector. We've seen that there was stagnated growth in the growth of credit to the private sector. We've seen all the sectors underperforming, mining, the services industry. And coming to 2020, the outcome of those events were compounded when you had the election fiasco and further compounded with the COVID-19 pandemic where the country was practically shut down. So that was the place from where this current administration, where you hold a very important and key portfolio, came in and would have had to rebuild. Now, when I looked at the numbers, all the indicators are markedly improved or significantly improved. Credit to the private sector, for example, has doubled. We've seen investment, both domestic and private investment, increasing exponentially. We've seen the economy expanding from a $800 billion economy to a nearly $5 trillion economy today. The non-oil economy alone is about $1.6 trillion in G dollars term. Job creation, from my estimation, over the last 5 years would have exceeded about 70,000 when I did my own analysis. You would recall when the PPPC came in, they said they are targeting 50,000. Persons thought that was unrealistic. But if you look at what's happening in one sector alone, in the construction sector alone, when you look at the transportation sector alone, over 40,000 vehicles added. And of that 40,000, you have about 20,000 in the commercial sector. I'm talking about hire cars, minibuses, vans, capital equipment, tractors, trucks, and so on. Those are areas in the transportation sector that create jobs. So overall, from my vantage point, briefly, we've seen all the sectors doing extremely well. The economy is doing well. And those are the perfect conditions that would enable an attractive investment destination. So from your vantage point where you're sitting, how would you say was the performance in terms of Guyana as an investment destination over the last 5 years, taking into account what you have inherited as a country?
Well, Joel, thank you. You have to go back, the previous 5 years, 2015 to 2020. What was missing as a government at the time, APNU government, that made a lot of wild promises. No strategy, no vision, no implementable plan. They had no idea what it was like to build a nation. And so fast forward to 2020, you're actually absolutely correct. We did inherit a stagnant economy. We actually inherit a backward economy. I mean, you mentioned 200 plus taxes, and you can go on and on the list of draconian strategies that APNU government, and I see them in the campaign trail again, making some wild promises that doesn't make sense. It's not a coherent plan. What the PPP government did, and Dr. Ali, when he came into government, presented a measurable long-term strategy 2030 and beyond. And in the 5 years that he has been in office, he has put and implemented that measurable plan. So from an investment standpoint, backwards to 2020, an investor wanted to see first a country with good leadership, bold leadership, a country that had vision, strategy, the measurable plan, and understand what it takes to move a nation forward. And what President Ali said, I think early on in his tenure, he said his success is the prosperity of all of Guyana. And that's where the One Guyana initiative came into play. And so as the investors started to look at Guyana as this destination, they looked at those basic components, and then they realized that once prudent management in the public sector is there, the private sector will do well. I use the term follow the money. When Dr. Ashish Singh presented the first budget and the continuous budget, it showed exactly where government will spend money. And a lot of people say, well, we can't eat roads or we can't eat other things. Yes. But, when I look at villages and I travel around the country, yes, people sometimes, when they use the term fastest growing economy, thinks we have this lots of money to give away. No, but first you have to build what the president is doing, build out the infrastructure. So I look at some villages where it had mud roads, and kids used to come out with their slippers and their clothes get muddy by the time they get home. If I was in that village, I would want that road fixed, which it has been finished. Then I would want a new school close by so that my kids don't have to go far. Then I would want a hospital close by so in case my kids get sick, it's there. So the government has built that community, and they've put all that infrastructure in place and invested in agriculture and other components. Now that the non-oil economy is doing better, 11.1% I believe in 2024, and when you're able to sustain the economy going forward, investors are coming in. So yes, the 2015 to 2020, I can probably count the investors on my hand that actually came into Ghana. No relevant investment that changed the scope of how we do business. 2020 to 2025, we'd had over $1 trillion worth of investment, thousands of jobs created, part of your 70,000. And more every day, we're finding larger scale investors coming in the country. And I really believe the success in the last 5 years and the success of the next 5 years and the plan of the next 5 years that the PPP administration, PPP party will present in a few weeks to the nation of what 2025 to 2030 looks like, I think that will see a whole new wave of new type of investments coming into the country.
Certainly. Of course, in attracting new investments, the government provides a menu of fiscal incentives. What I find from my experience in dealing with some of the private sector players, some of them do not know that the incentives, fiscal incentives, there are two types of fiscal incentives, or two baskets I would call them. There are those that you submit a proposal to apply for that are sector specific, and there are fiscal incentives that the government administered permanently through their fiscal policies. For example, they've removed corporate taxes from the private education sector. They've removed VAT from a lot of things. They've removed VAT and other taxes from capital equipment in the agriculture sector. So those previously, a couple of years ago, you had to apply for those. And then there are some others that you'd have to apply for. Now, tell our viewers how those incentives, what are the sectors, what are the target sectors, how those incentives are applied. Are they across the board? Because there is this concern that whether there is a level playing field. Now, there is a level playing field, but I want to give you the opportunity to speak to that, because you're the authority in that portfolio, and how those incentives administered over this 5 year the kind of achievement you've had
By
in various
law, yeah,
sectors?
by law, investors are protected, both domestic and foreign investors. There's no difference between a local investor and a foreign investor. And I think that's one of the key components of our Investment Act. In addition, I mean, there are many different levels of incentives. For example, in 2021, early 21, the president, through the Ministry of Tourism, put out an expression of interest for 2,000 new hotel rooms, luxury rooms, by 2025. And in that EOI, we had a special tax regime. If a hotel come into Guyana, they'll get the concessions of the building materials. At the time, those were still taxable, you know, all of the components of that hotel, and then we offer a tax holiday concession. And what happened is major brands, both local and foreign investors, really went gung-ho. We're about to see the Hyatt Place open, the Four Point Sheraton. We know the Best Western Aden, which is a local investor, proud of our local investment strategy. We've got the AC Marriott, we've got the Marriott Courtyard, we've got the Pasha Group next to Lilliendal building, the tallest building so far in Guyana. So we would have achieved that, and all the jobs that came with that in the last 5 years. Now prices of hotel rooms will go down. Investors are going to look at that. In the sectors of manufacturing, as you said, fiscal policy changed a lot over the last few years. You don't pay custom duties on a cement plant, for example, or certain items in the manufacturing sector. But you could also apply for concessions through our office in supporting goods. I believe in the next 5 years, Joel, if I can switch to the next level of investments and the type of incentives we will give, as we bring the energy costs down by 50%, you know, the gas to shore is in progress, and that should happen hopefully very soon. And as the energy cost comes down, the manufacturing sector will boom. You saw recently the Jamaicans came into Guyana. Grace Kennedy, which is a large agro producer in the Caribbean, has decided to come into our country. I've met with companies like Del Monte, and I've said to them, your products is all our shelves in the Caribbean. You know, you've got two choices. One, either come into Guyana and take our coconuts and our pineapples and you can those, or somebody else is going to put you out of business. Right. And, you know, if we can form consortium, Grace Kennedy, some of our local providers, we will be able to do that. So the manufacturing sector will gain a new set of incentives over the next 5 years, because that's the future of a lot of our jobs. And, you know, the exciting part, and our viewers need to understand, you know, what have happened in the last 5 years, whether it's through fiscal policies, leadership, incentives, we have all benefited as citizens, right? If you look at your level, you know, and barring the fact that we do like to complain, you know, we're never contented. It's okay. You know, I want more. $100,000 last year. Somebody wants more next year or this year. And that's okay. But you've got to measure where you were 2020 and where you're at today in 2025. And what have you seen around us, and what is the future? That's where I tell people on the campaign trail, and I'm on the campaign trail now, there's no need to go back. You know exactly what the last government prior to the PPC administration came in. You saw what happened, the jobs lost, close the sugar industry tomorrow. What's going to happen again? You know, put on new taxes, you know, all these wild legislation that they're proposing. All that will do is stagnate the economy again. And I think we're very, very much more cognizant of the fact we want our lives to continue to improve. And I always tell, you know, when I travel throughout Guyana looking for better investments from our local economy, is tell people, understand where you fit. Guyana is for us. We've got to take the opportunities on the economic side, on the development side, social. And I'm proud of what our government has done. You know, when you look at, you know, I think it's 7 to 10 new hospitals being built around the country. Diamond was just open. I want a better life. I want to be able to go close. And that's an investment. That's a public investment. But that public investment drives the private investor. And if you follow that money, if I know government is going to build a new road from Linden to Lethem, then that means something is going to happen now along that road. I need to start looking at what I can develop. I can tell you, Linden is about to explode too in set of investments. We've
Yeah.
got some large hotel chains looking at the Blue Lake. We've got the dairy farm, $25 million being put up together right now with DDL and an outside company. So all of that will bring jobs in all of our regions. And that's why I wear the One Guyana pin. And the reason for that, the president's initiative is to ensure that all of us across all regions benefit from our newfound wealth, and taking that newfound wealth and investing it back into components of our society, whether it's social, whether it's economics, that will continue to enhance our lives. You can't beat that. And that's where I believe bold leadership is seen, and all hats off to our president for sticking with a plan and ensuring that when he said he's going to do it, he's going to do it. And that's what, going back to your original point of the investment code, we will continue to ensure a smooth enabling environment, the single window and all those things that are coming out, digitization from the government side. I think the private sector really needs to step up to and ensure that, when you go to a store, you don't have to fill out 5 different bills and to pay. Those are things we've got to continue to do. And it's an exciting period. The next 5 years, we are in for a ride, and a beautiful ride that will take Guyana where I tell folks, no matter what my great-grandmother dream was, what my grandmother dream was, what my mother dream was, and what my dream or my kids' dream, we get to see it in real time in our lifetime.
You spoke of leadership, and you've emphasized the point of leadership at a national level. And one of the important things that from the private sector and investment standpoint, this growth that you talk about and all the opportunities that you talk about, the private sector has to recognize, and I think they have, that they can't do it alone. And so partnerships, joint ventures, consortiums, and even going public, and so that has become important. And that culture change has been driven by the leadership.
Absolutely.
Right up at the top at the national level. The president himself, from day one, have been pushing for that, and we've seen some successes in that regard. We've seen the formation of some consortium. We've seen a lot of joint ventures being created with foreign companies and local companies, and we've seen a gradual change in the market in terms of private sector behavior and their outlook towards that sort of collaboration. There are still some challenges. There are still those reservations. There are still, you still have to do your due diligence.
Yeah, but it's proven though. It's
proven.
worked because
It's
putting
proven,
the caterers together to be able to compete to win a contract with Exxon, that was great. The other one that I think is probably the most successful is putting 5 competitors in the poultry sector together and says, okay, you can continue to buy your food from the outside for the chickens, the stock feed, or we can grow it ourselves. They invested their money, and we will be self-sufficient in soybean and corn very soon, and that will reduce the cost of when we talk about cost of living, those consortiums help, and it's the other one that we're working on, to continue your joint venture consortium approach, is we've got some of the best honey in the world, in the Amazons, but we have cottage industry doing the honey. So we've got to try to put some of these honey producers together and then create a Guyana honey, so that brand Guyana, home of the best honey, right? Why would I want to buy honey from somewhere in Philadelphia when I can buy honey from somewhere in the Amazon? It's a powerful marketing, clean economy. And that's what the other differentiation, going back to why investors are looking at our nation so aggressively, is we've got some components that most of the other developing countries that have rocketed over the last 50 years have never had. We've got natural resources. We've got the oil, we have the gas, we've got the agriculture, and with food security, energy security, and climate security, the president's and the biodiversity that the president has outlined and uses it as his foundation plan is a differentiating factor for the investor. So The incentives of consortium joint ventures, I believe, needs to be much more aggressive. I think we are learning the culture that, as the president said the other night, family businesses have done well in Guyana, continue to do well. But in order to grow and take over the regional market, say in agro-processing, hurricane season is coming up. You go on every shelf, there's not a lot of Guyanese products on the shelves across the Caribbean. Our office, part of our office is called the Export Readiness Division. And we are working aggressively to get some of these products into the broader market. We have been successful in getting only coconut into Barbados and other parts of the region. We have been successful in getting comfort sleep or mattress in parts of the region. And so we want some of the local distributors, even the Macy's and the supermarkets, to have a shelf that call Brand Guyana. Let's brand our products. Let's let people get a taste of what we have. And when you look at the pepper pot in a box, it's one of the greatest innovation in agro-processing I've seen in Guyana. You open that box and you put that packet in the microwave for 2 minutes, 3 minutes, and you've got some of the best pepper pot, right? I sent it to my mother overseas, and she says, well, I don't have to cook Christmas anymore. Mm-hmm. And so, but that's the type of innovative in terms of our private sector that we need to then rally around and help them get into larger production.
Yeah, we're getting there, but we need to be, as you've pointed out, we need to be a little bit more aggressive in that regard. Now, I just want to highlight, you've mentioned it, but I want to highlight expressly that the incentives that are applied, it's the same incentives that for both a foreign investor and a local
Absolutely.
investor. There is no distinction.
No.
There's no distinction.
And I said, I'm proud of going back just to the hotel example. Out of the 10 hotels, close to half of that are locally owned, locally funded, and and actually be the first to open. Best Western Aden, the King's Hotel is about to open. Those are all local funded hotels.
Right. Now, as we come down to wrapping up time, I want to ask you two final questions. In this last 5 years, I know you've done a phenomenal job promoting Guyana on the international stage. You've been to many different countries, attended many different fora promoting Guyana. What would you say were your experience in terms of interacting within those international fora, and what would you say are their perspective of Guyana?
Well, I like to refer to our country, Guyana, from a stock perspective. You're a financial expert. I consider the ticker 1GY. And when you go to buy a stock in the developed world, you tend to look at multiple components. How is the company doing financially? What is their marketable product, long-term strategy, their leadership, their performance. And so as I travel and I use that analogy, and then investors that have studied Guyana look at us and go, we are a high-performing stock. We've got one of the best leadership you'll find ever in the region and the world with our president and his strong vision. You've got a high-performance, financial, stable economy. You've got a population that is being every day educated. I think 70,000 scholarships, the free education, the university, the BIT program, the technical training center. The government is investing back in our people so that we can have higher paying jobs. Mm-hmm. And so as investors look at Guyana, and when we're able to tell the story, that's the feedback I get, that we are a high-performing stock. If you're investing in your people, you have a strategy to improve their lives. The president said his measurement of success in his first and second term is the prosperity and wealth of all Guyanese, and we got to make sure that we continue to take advantage of his initiatives. Investors tend to gravitate towards that, and I see the next 5 years as a much more radical growth in terms of both foreign and local investment coming into our country. I see higher paying jobs for our people. They've got to take the advantage of the training. And then government will continue, as the President has outlined, to develop our country, develop the infrastructure, develop the roads, develop the all-weather roads for our farmers, develop the housing programs. I mean, I just went to Bartica recently and this place called 5 Mile. There's a whole set of housing development going on. Rooney, yesterday I went up off the highway, 500 homes being built. And you know, when I watch the Minister of Housing give out the lot number and you see the look on our people's face that there's an opportunity for better, that's what I want to see in the next 5 years, that we continue this aggressive growth, and I look forward to seeing Guyana 2030 and beyond.
You have preempted my final question and you went into answering it without me asking, and that was, what is the outlook from your vantage point for the next 5 years? And you've articulated that well. Any closing remarks?
No, I think we're going into an election cycle. I think as citizens, we're going to hear quite a bit of rhetoric out there, a lot of promises that we know can be fulfilled or wasn't fulfilled. I think we've got to really concentrate on what has happened in the last 5 years. It has been significant, and I think we've got to make sure that we continue to work together. The One Guyana approach, working together to build this nation, this Guyanese dream that we are seeing come true, let's make sure we continue that. And that's my hope and wish for the next 5 years.
Let's stay the course.
Yes.
Stay the course.
Stay the course.
Dr. Ramsaroop, it's been a pleasure as always to have you here and to have this sort of discussion. To the viewers, thank you for watching. This brings us to the end of this episode of Ignite Finance with your host, Joel Bhagwardin. Thank you, and until next time.